Here's to whiskey kisses, the peaty taste of sin.
It's whiskey time. Greetings, whiskey folk, and welcome back to Drinking Out Loud. My name is Adam Bradshaw, and I am here today to tell you all about the Scotch Malt Whisky Society of Canada's 148th Outturn. Yes, this is February of 2024, and it is quite the interesting little lineup of whiskies that you see here before you. Not one, but two different first-time ever releases for a distillery in the SMWS Canada. And yeah, we're starting off today with something quite interesting. A whiskey that confused a lot of people on Thursday's tasting. I haven't done Sundays yet, but a lot of people on Thursday were shocked to discover what this whiskey was once we revealed it. But this is Extravagance meets Timeless Elegance. Lovely. An air of extravagance exuded, which we described as lemon taglioni with taleggio sprinkled with truffle shavings and followed by grilled honey balsamic glazed fruits. The taste was very different, juicy and tropical, like a bay breeze cocktail of pineapple and cranberry juices, white rum and a splash of grenadine. The addition of water emphasised that feeling of summer delight, with the scent of passion fruit parfait, orange sorbet and a dollop of tutti frutti ice cream. The very refined creamy texture on the palate was like a vanilla almond coconut milkshake. Following 13 years in an ex-bourbon hogshead, we transferred this whiskey into a second fill, Sautern's barrique. Yeah. Sounds like an extravagant way to start off a tasting, doesn't it? Sautern's finished whiskey in position number 1. But I think important to note, second fill. So we're not getting a huge amount of Sautern's cask influence on this. It's more of just a little enhancement rather than a whole character overload, you know? It's overthrow, rather. It's a cool little whiskey. All right, so this was distilled on the 21st of July 2006. It was distilled in the Speyside region, and as we mentioned, ex-bourbon hogshead for 13 years and a second fill ex Sautern's barrique for the remaining 3. This is 16 years aged. 231 bottles came out of the cask at a cask strength of 57.4% ABV, and it is Society cask number 85.73. Okay. It's interesting on the nose. It's this aroma reminds me of like almost champagne in a sense. It's got that sort of slightly funky yeasty thing going on, with like lemon peel and grass and all kinds of interesting. Yeah, it totally smells like champagne. That's kind of wild, actually. I'm surprised that didn't come up in the notes. Yeah. That is a very clear picture right now in my nostrils of champagne. Very strange. It's so delicate, but it's not light. So it's definitely not... Juicy oak and vanilla is probably a pretty good... a pretty good category for this to be in. I agree with the panel on that one. It's definitely not light and delicate, but if it could be juicy oak and vanilla and delicate, that's probably where I'd go. Because it's not overpowering. It has flavour, it's got character, but it's not punching you in the face with it, you know? And I think a lot of that comes from the age. 16 years is a decent amount of time in cask. It's going to mellow everything out. And the fact that it says ex-bourbon hogshead, not ex-fill or... Sorry, not first fill or refill. Sorry, or second fill, means it's probably a refill. So, an older, slightly more tired ex-bourbon hogshead, perhaps to begin with, and then a second fill, Sauternes barrique to finish. There's not an awful lot of oak influence on this. It's about the right amount, I would say. I think it's far too easy to over-influence a whiskey that's in the, the second half of the second decade. Anything 15 plus that's had too active of a cask can overthrow the balance and make it a weird you can't really tell the distillate anymore. Which, if you can't taste the distillate, it doesn't matter where it's from at that point. You could bottle anything and put it in a cask for 15 years. But this, you can still get some really interesting distillate-driven characters, even though it's 16 years of age, which is wonderful. And there's something about the lighting in here, and I realise it happens more when I hold it up to the bottle. I was about to say it has a weird green hue, but it's just the studio, I think. It's the blue walls and being next to a green bottle, but it does look, in my glass right now, like someone's playing some kind of St. Patrick's Day prank and has dyed my whiskey green. It's very strange. But yeah, it's really weirdly champagne-y. I definitely prefer to toast with this at New Year's. Lovely. So what can we tell you about Distillery 85? Well, I can tell you that it's a distillery that I don't have that much experience with, and I kind of assumed it was just going to be one of those, boring, this distillery was opened for a blend and has done nothing in the last 200 years of note kind of distilleries. But there's actually some really interesting history to this one, which is kind of cool. So it opened in the year 1900, which is a bloody terrible time to open a whiskey distillery, right before the massive crash. And as such, closed after only 5 months of operation, which is pretty sad. It sold in 1901, and then again in 1906, and it restarted production at that point. And it sold again in 1930 to Scottish malt distillers, and it's been used since then for the White Horse blend, which I don't really see outside of Scotland, but is particularly popular. One of my favourite lyrics from a Richard Thompson song, Bee's Wing, refers to it, actually. White horse in her hip pocket and a wolfhound at her feet. She was a rare thing, fine as a bee's wing. But yeah, this is a distillery that shares the name with a town in the Speyside region, but is technically not from that town. It's from the small hamlet of Fogwat, which is just a delightful word to say. I encourage you all to do so at home, Fogwat. This is Glen Elgin. 16 years aged Glen Elgin. And also, interestingly about Glen Elgin, they only got electricity in 1950. For the first 50 years of production, which, electricity was definitely around before 1950. They just used paraffin for everything. They weren't on the grid until 1950, which is kind of wild. It's very, very rare to have Glen Elgin as a single malt release. In fact, the only consistently released official bottling that has since been discontinued is a now legendary 12-year-old that was only available in Japan. Wildly enough, there have been some, annual limited edition releases as part of the rare malts or the flora and fauna, perhaps. But yeah, as a standard single malt, yeah, only ever in Japan. But yeah, beautiful, beautiful whiskey. And I think, frankly, it got a little overlooked on Thursday. There's some exciting things coming up later on in this outturn, but this deserves a second glimpse. Actually, I would encourage anyone who tried this on Thursday to I would love to share another dram with you so you can have your minds changed, because on second approach, now I know what I'm in for. This is delightful. but it's always a hard sell when it's in the number one position. As I always say at the beginning of every tasting, number one's a hard sell because you're about to have 7 more whiskies. So always save a little bit in your glass to go back to later on. But the flip side of that is if it's a really good number one, people finish it early and then don't get a chance to go back and try it again later, and then they don't buy it because they can't remember by that point if they liked it more or less than number 7 or it's 6 or, you know. But I'm very happy with this whiskey. I think it's quite pleasant. All right. If you are interested in picking up a bottle of this, you can do so right now at strathliquor.com/SMWS, and you can do so for $262.52. All right. Whiskey number 2 today is from the Sweet, Fruity and Mellow selection. This is a debuting whiskey here in Canada, or at least here in BC, but it's also only available in BC. This is exclusively available in British Columbia. Nowhere else in Canada is getting this one, and it is called Toasted Peanut Butter and Jam Sandwich. We imagined harvest time in an apple orchard, wooden crates brimming with ripe apples as we sat down for a rest and enjoyed a toasted peanut butter and jam sandwich. It was sweet and spicy on the palate, with marmalade, apricot and orange chutney. Alongside we had cask-strength oak-aged Calvados and those typically lively citrus flavours, as well as nutmeg and vanilla. With a drop of water, toffee, caramel and cocoa butter aromas emerged, next to lime cordial and fruity pastels. The taste was of strawberry yogurt on oatcakes along with diced banana and sweet apple tart with a pear caramel upside-down cake in the finish. Lovely. And as I read those notes, I realised I forgot to get myself any water for this. And, well, frankly, it's too late now. If you would like to know what these taste like with water, you'll have to just trust the panel of experts. And in fact, the tasting panel, nobody does it better. It says right on the front of this month's book, and there's a whole suite of information on page 4 and 5 of this month's Outturn booklet about the tasting panel and the process that they go through. It's quite riveting. I do feel bad about not having any water. If you would like to know my opinions of these whiskies with water, drop us a line in the comments, and I will happily pour myself another glass off camera and tell you what I think. But I do remember from Thursday's tasting thinking that whilst all of them took water really well, none of them changed dramatically this month with water, with the exception possibly of number 5, actually. But this one is a delight. And I like to think that I had somewhat of a factor in the fact that this bottling was brought over here, because Alberta got a Glasgow distillery, we got an English whiskey. Yes, we did. Is it the accent, guys? Yeah, this is a really cool one. So yeah, distilled in England and matured in a first fill STR barrique. Yeah, aged for just 5 years, which shocked a lot of people. And distilled on the 25th of February 2017, an outturn of 273 bottles at a cask strength of 61.3. Yeah. And this is part of the new wave, if you're wondering about the artwork. I mentioned this in I think, November or maybe October's video. We're getting a series of whiskies that were bottled for the 40th anniversary, which now last year, of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, celebrating new upcoming distilleries and featuring artwork from the original illustrator of the SMWS and the person whose artwork still adorns the vaults, Mr. Bob Dewar. Which is actually the perfect surname for someone working in whiskey illustration, isn't it? Dewar. It's, All right. 146.3. So 146 is the code. And those amongst you who are familiar with the English whiskies we've had on these videos in the SMWS will note that this is not the English Whiskey Company. This is not St. George's Distillery. This is not the makers of War Seahorse. This is a new one. And this is my first time on Thursday ever having something from this distillery at cask strength and at single cask. And I have to be honest, I was never that much of a fan of I've only had like 2 of their official bottlings, and I kind of was like, it's all right. It's not really come up in conversation much since, because I prefer St. George's, frankly. But this has really, really changed my opinion on the distillery. I was very, very impressed with this whiskey, and I'm hoping we see more things like this from them in the years to come. So, as much as, excuse me, as much as peanut butter and jam are strong flavours, On the nose, the thing that really gets me, especially from the name of this whiskey, is the toast. It smells like Warburton's brown bread, toasted at a number 5 setting in a 1980s toaster in Leicestershire. If you're thinking that's a very specific thing, yeah, it's my grandma's house. Oh, yeah. Yeah, wonderfully bready. Yeah, that's very pleasant. I don't know much about this distillery, honestly. They might be one of the newer distilleries that's starting to use different types of barleys and yeasts. I didn't see any information at first glance about that. I'd be surprised, frankly, with some of the people that were working on it. But it has that sort of bready character that comes from some of those newer craft distilleries. But it doesn't smell like it's only 5 years aged, which is kind of wild. Oh, nor does it taste like it. Yeah, chutney is a good word. It's got that sweet spice, like not in like a dessert spice kind of a way, but like in a condiment like chutney kind of way. I want to dip my poppadoms in this. And I realise poppadoms aren't really that much of big of a thing here. If you're not familiar with poppadoms, they're kind of like a big, fresh baked bread cracker thing at Indian restaurants. I think lentils, maybe, actually. I don't know. I'm not sure what poppadoms are made of, but they're delightful, and you dip them in chutney. And for some reason, they're not really as much of a thing in Indian restaurants in Canada, but every Indian restaurant I think I've ever been to in the United Kingdom will have poppadoms on the menu. Yeah, big, thick dollops of, like, not vanilla ice cream. It's not quite that sweet. More like a vanilla yogurt, maybe. Yeah, that's lovely. That truly is beautiful. Right, so I played a trick on everyone that was there on Thursday. And I intend on playing a trick this afternoon at Sunday's Outturn. I'm recording this on Sunday morning. So see if you can tell what distillery I was trying to trick the local SMWS members into thinking this is. Because remember, at this point, they don't know where it's from. They don't know it's English. They don't know anything about this. They don't even know the age. So I gave them this trivia. This, not Scotch, started as a collaboration between a Scottish production director and legendary expert in whiskey maturation, Dr. Jim Swan. Turned a lot of heads in 2016 when they started a crowdfunding campaign to raise capital. Now, if you've lived in Victoria for the last 5 years and you're vaguely interested in whiskey, you will probably just assume that I'm talking about Macaloney. Macaloney's Island, that is. Previously, what was it before? Macaloney's Caledonian. Previously, before that, it was Victoria Caledonian. They keep changing their name. But yes, this is not a Macaloney. This is not a Canadian whiskey. But I had a bit of fun trying to trick people into thinking it was. This is Cotswolds. And the Scottish production director in question is not Graham McAloney, it is Harry Coburn of Bowmore previously, which is kind of cool. But yeah, one thing that it does share in common with McAloney and quite a few other distilleries that Jim Swan worked with is the use of that first fill STR barrique. And that's where they take an ex-wine cask, they shave it, they toast it, they rechar it. And it makes wonderfully sort of vibrant tasting whiskies at a younger age, which is really kind of cool. Shaved, toasted, recharred. Or if you're doing the tour guide at Macaloney Caledonian, they will call it Swan's Toasted Reserve, which is lovely. And I wonder if Jim actually called it that himself, or whether that's a later on sort of celebration of Jim Swan's achievements since he passed. But either way, beautiful whiskey. I'm really, really happy to say that there's now a couple of English whiskey distilleries that I can be proud of. I actually picked up an English whiskey when I was back there in December, but I haven't opened and tried yet. But there's now a whiskey distillery called Wireworks in Derbyshire, which is the county where I'm from. So I am really looking forward to seeing if Derbyshire whiskey is actually any good. I bought a bottle regardless because it's going to remind me of home, whether it's good or bad, and I will enjoy that aspect of it. But yeah, I might even put it on a video. if you would like to pick up this English whiskey, this BC exclusive English whiskey, you can do so right now at strathliquor.com/SMWS for $232.09. And shout out to our other BC vendors as well. If you miss out at the Strath, you might be able to get it at Legacy. And I'm not sure our now third BC store over in Kelowna, Arc, they don't do every Outturn, so I'm not sure if they're doing this month's, but worth looking at what they've got in inventory anyway. Arc over in Kelowna, the third in our trifecta of BC SMWS brothers. I'm not sure what to call us. Team SMWS BC. That's what we'll go for. All right, this next whiskey is an interesting one. I actually mentioned at the beginning of the Outturn on Thursday that not only is there 2 brand new distilleries in this tasting, there's also two occasions where the SMWS has broken a previous rule and created like a new subset of rules in the recent past. And now, this Outturn, they're breaking those new rules back to the old rules. And this is one of them. So this next whiskey is called Whiskey Baba. On the nose neat, we poured golden syrup and honey onto wheat biscuit breakfast cereal. Some indulged in chocolate-coated marzipan and slices of rich Madeira cake, while others baked a golden syrup sponge that was heavy on orange peel and dry papaya. The taste was an explosion of rum-soaked pineapples, whilst the French oak contributed spices such as anise and cinnamon. A satisfying toasty oak note evolved into vanilla pods, mace, nutmeg, orange oil, and mango. With a splash of water, we could smell a bowl of sugar-coated puffed rice, varnish and resinous oak, ginger cake, orange zest, and barley sugars. There were deep notes of dunnage warehouses, apple cubes, and hints of buttery rancio, topped off with desiccated coconut. The palate was now silky and mouth-coating with tangerines and dark chocolate, and a whiskey baba pudding. Melon and mango were drizzled with floral honey as we ate chocolate orange cake mix straight from the bowl. Whiskey baba. Yeah, so this is part of the Heresy range. It was aged for 12 years. It's batch 20 of the Heresy range, which is kind of cool. Yeah, and the big thing here is it was matured in a combination of bourbon hogsheads and ex-rum French oak barriques. Now there's a cask type, isn't it? French oak, not American oak, ex-rum, and a barrique, which is a wine size. Really interesting stuff going on here. But what is the rule, the new rule, that has replaced an old rule that has now been broken? Well, the whole thing of the Heresy range is that it was there to break the SMWS's rules, right? And that's why it's in clear glass, not green glass, for a start. Every Heresy range so far has been bottled at 50% alcohol. This one is cask strength. They're breaking their own new rules. 58.6. And it's kind of nice to see that, to be honest. As much as I don't mind blended malts and such as at 50%, it's perfectly cromulent. It's nice to see the SMWS going back to what they, originally were doing, cask strength. I'm sure this is not going to be every release from now on in the Heresy, but it's nice to know that every so often it'll pop up. So, there is a little bit more information about how they created this whiskey on the back label here. To create this expression, we opted for some rather unusual casks. Crafted from French oak, these barriques had previously been used to mature Jamaican rum in the Cognac region of France. We filled them with a selection of Speyside malts for a period of 28 months of additional maturation. We then blended selected casks together to create this intensely fruity dram. Now, if I were a betting man, I would say that those ex-Caribbean from French oak casks used to actually have a brandy in them before then, perhaps even a cognac. If I was a betting man, I would say that it was probably a brandy that was made by Maison Ferrand, and this was probably actually a cask that went towards the Plantation rum brand, because that's what they do. They buy matured rum and they finish it in ex-brandy casks, in French oak brandy casks of that, in France. I can't imagine there's that many other companies doing that. Maybe there are. I'm not familiar with the French rum scene as much as maybe I should be. But if I was a betting man, I would say this is an ex-plantation cask, which is kind of cool. One more thing of note before I pop the cork and give myself a dram. This won a double gold medal in the 2023 San Francisco World Spirits Competition, which is a huge achievement. It is in the absolute upper echelon of all whiskies that were submitted that year. which I think was the same competition where the overall winner was the Gariana from Westland. So I guess they like really interesting cask types in that panel. But yeah, here we go. Whiskey Barber. Lovely. Really enjoy the artwork on here. It reminds me of like a Hawaiian shirt. The kind of thing that Rick Souza would wear at the Union Club on a hot summer's day. It's a very specific reference to our whiskey club here, but hopefully some of you got a giggle out of that. Ooh. Yeah, it's big, it's lively, it's tropical. It's, yeah, it's unashamed in its amount of cask influence on this one. This is definitely not what I would refer to as a balanced whiskey, because the cask is out of balance with the spirit, but in terms of flavour profile, just on base purely on flavour alone, it is balanced in terms of it's not overly sweet, it's not overly sour, it's not overly bitter. It's a nice level playing field, but still interesting. You know, there's a lot of ups and downs, but the average is right in the middle. But yeah, it's definitely more cask forward, which is not bad. It's just a different style, different strokes for different folks, and that tastes like barbecued pineapple. It's like a luau. Yeah, dried coconut specifically as well. So I generally don't like desiccated coconut, but I think it's more of a textural thing. I'm usually more of a fan of using like coconut syrups and creams and things to get coconut flavour in. But this is the flavour of desiccated coconut without the weird texture, and I approve of that. Yeah, that's glorious. Yeah, if you want something fun, inviting, vigorous, vibrant, and just a little bit different, you can't go wrong with a bottle of Whiskey Barber. Especially, you know, we don't know what distilleries went into this. It's a Speyside blend, that's all we know. We know it was made by the wonderful guys at Scotch Malt Whisky Society in their brand new facility, probably, which they revealed last year. I think I'll either have it on a slide right now, or it was already shown a little while ago. But yeah, it's very cool that the SMWS is doing more of these more experimental things, and it's really cool that it's really exciting actually that as a company that's now in its 41st year, it's not just resting on tradition and laurels. It's still breaking out, branching out, doing different things, and that's cool. I like to see that. There's nothing worse than something that was once exciting and with the times just becoming a fuddy-duddy, you know, being old and settling into what they know. But yeah, this small batch blended malt Whiskey Barber can be yours if you are quick off the draw. There should be some available at strathliquor.com/SMWS or in store at 919 Douglas Street for $208.61. All right. Up next, we have a whiskey that was very, very highly regarded and very much talked about at the Victoria Whisky Festival 2024, which was a huge success. Thank you to everyone who was involved in that. This had a bit of a sneak preview at a tasting there. We're about to have a full frontal dichotomy. Perfumed aromas mixed with toffee apples, dessert wine and calvados, while toasted pine nut and crushed oily Brazil nuts were sprinkled onto marmalade-glazed pork belly. The palate, however, was rich and dark with burnt toffee, molasses and pine tar, blending into maple syrup, licorice and Christmas cake. Water released lighter aromas of caramel, mojito cocktails, and grilled pineapple served with mint chocolate ice cream and menthol rub. Back to the palate, and delicious spices now combined with rum and ginger ale, coffee and bitter marmalade. Burnt fruitcake joined heavy wood with firm tannins on a finish that was both dry and sweet. And after 13 years in a bourbon hogshead, this was transferred to a Spanish oak Oloroso hogshead. All right. So I teased in the email, trying to round people up and get people buying tickets for the tasting. I had a little bit of a teaser this month that we were going to see some new things, but also some distilleries, which are some of the SMWS's most prized, most sought after distilleries, ones that they've bottled a lot of. And this is one of those. This is 39.255. No, wait. I'm reading the Outturn. There's 255 bottles. Oh, sorry, that doesn't seem familiar. There's 255 bottles of this. 39.275. There we go. This is the 275th release from Distillery 39, so a particularly popular one. It is a Speyside distillery, and this was distilled on the 24th of July 2006 and placed into an ex-bourbon hogshead before being finished in that first fill ex-Oloroso hogshead for approximately 3 years. This is 16 years aged, came out at 56.7. And is quite something. All right. Lovely. It's very just classic, old school, old style whiskey, this one. I've had a decent amount of whiskey from this distillery recently, and a lot of it tends to be on the older side in less active casks, or on one occasion on the older side in really active casks, and that's quite something. This is, it's 16. It's on the older side, but not as old as a lot of whiskey that comes from this distillery. But it's a distillery that works well, old and young, to be honest. It kind of morphs from this more of a lighter, more herbal, fruity thing into this more majestic, old, sort of refined whiskey when it gets to around 15 and up. Yeah, it's a very sort of old school, rustic flavour profile when it gets to those sort of ages. It tastes dusty in the best way possible. Yeah, it's got a nice sort of two sides of the same coin here. You're simultaneously getting big, sort of vibrant, fresh notes, but also these dark, dank, dusty kind of notes at the same time. It's like taking a fresh picnic basket into an old cabin. Oh. And frankly, it tastes like a super old peated whiskey where the peat has dissipated and you're left with some of those other flavours that come along with it. It's got, pork belly, right? When do you get pork belly in unpeated whiskey? Very, very rarely. But it's totally got that sort of almost grape must glazed pork belly, like almost more like pork crackling as well. Just the rinds, pork rind for the North American audience. But at the same time, it's got like pineapple fudge. Yeah, that's... There's a lot of stories to be told in this whiskey. There's a lot happening. It feels like the kind of whiskey that you would pull out and have if you were having visiting dignitaries. In my household, my dad was a vicar, so our visiting dignitary was always the bishop. And I mean, maybe the bishop liked whiskey. I'm not sure, but in our household, it was always you had that special box of biscuits, cookies for the North American audience that you'd pull out for when the bishop was coming to tea. And you'd make sure the tea was perfect, and you'd have these special biscuits for the special visiting dignitary. This feels like a visiting dignitary kind of a whiskey, to be honest. Like, it feels like an ambassadorial thing, where you crack open a bottle and you share it. You share it to enjoy yourself, but also to show someone else that you respect them, or maybe care for them. It doesn't have to be like a business dignitary. It could be a grandparent coming to visit who doesn't visit very often, or something like that. But it feels like a sharing with a long-lost friend or mentor kind of a whiskey. Or I finally finished my dissertation, I'm opening a nice bottle kind of a whiskey. It has that sort of rustic elegance to it, that it feels like that kind of occasion whiskey. That's really quite pleasant. All right, so 39, if you're not familiar, is a wonderful distillery that started all the way back in 1824. It was rebuilt in 1874. It was rebuilt again in 1972, and it was rebuilt again in 2012. So I don't know if there's any part of the original distillery yet, but it still bears its name. It's a bit of it's a ship of Theseus distillery. It's a distillery of Theseus. It's owned by Diageo, and it's actually the front runner for a long time when they were planning their classic malt series, which is where they have a distillery that they own from each major region of Scotland. 2 for the Highlands for some reason. They split it into North and South. And this was almost the Speyside whiskey in that. It was taken over by Cragganmore instead. And I believe that's because this distillery was just too necessary as a blending ingredient. It's a major blending ingredient in some of Diageo's big selling well-known whiskies, including, I believe it's a major component of the Johnny Walker Green label, if I remember correctly. I think it's the green that has this one. But this is Linkwood, a freaking fantastic distillery. Very rarely seen as an official bottling, most likely seen as a Gordon MacPhail bottling, but probably not for much longer, seeing as of last month, Gordon MacPhail no longer bottle other people's whiskey. They are strictly only bottling their own Benromach and Cairn whiskies from now on, which is kind of cool. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. They're going to be bottling other people's whiskies for quite some time. They're not going to be putting anyone else's whiskey into their casks. That's a key difference, actually. They will still be bottling other people's whiskies, but they're not going to be maturing other people's whiskies. So you'll see some G&M for a while. And that is where you'd see a lot of Linkwood. And outside of that, you'll see it in other independent bottlers. In fact, right now, we've got Artist Collective, Cooper's Choice, Jean Boyer. But anytime the SMWS bottles a Linkwood, it turns heads, and this one is going to turn more heads than most. It is quite stunning. And you may be able to get some. This one was particularly popular on Thursday. I have a feeling it's going to be in high demand, and we're a couple of bottles down because we used bottles from our inventory to feature it at the Whiskey Festival. But you might still be in with a chance if you go to strathliquor.com/SMWS. It is $319.91, and it is gorgeous. Next up, we have potentially, I think, my favourite from a how surprised I was standpoint from this Outturn so far. We've got Bull and Bear. A very calm, relaxing, and fragrant, intoxicating scent of thyme, tarragon, and moss, as well as lavender angelica, and under fern-laden undergrowth, plenty of wild mint. On the palate, 2 comments to be highlighted. Sweet as a nut, and barantatze, a bear's paw, or a small cream-filled puff pastry. Following reduction, loads of eucalyptus, honeysuckle, tea tree oil, and balsamic vinegar next to red vermouth and bramble liqueur. The taste was that of spiced walnut cake with a pomegranate molasses frosting next to a classic cocktail called Blood and Sand. Whiskey, sweet vermouth, cherry liqueur, and freshly squeezed orange juice, garnished with orange peel. Made with Great Western pale malts. This is a fun one. So, this is an American single malt. Yes, it is. It is from a first fill barrel and number 2 char. From the 16th of January 2018, this was only aged for 3 years, and it didn't need a day more, honestly. This is a beautiful whiskey. Outturn of 230 bottles and ABV of 58.7. Yeah. This is cool. I can't wait to try this again, so I won't. Yeah, 58.7, 231 bottles. This is distillery 143.3. So, my big takeaway from this is I imagine that this is a close approximation to what a single malt Scotch whiskey would be like if it was finished in an ex-Jägermeister cask. It's got some really interesting herbal, almost like herbal remedy notes. It feels like this will cure what ails you. And it's lovely. Big fan. Yeah, I was very impressed with this on Thursday, and from the nose today, I'm just as impressed. Absolutely one of the best 3-year-old whiskies I've ever had. Like, I've had a lot of 3-year-old whiskies because, well, I've had a lot of whiskies. And I especially enjoy exploring new whiskies from new distilleries. So I've had a lot of 3-year-olds. This is absolutely in the top 5 3-year-old whiskies I've ever had. Like, without a doubt. And I've had some, 3-year-old whiskies from a lot of distilleries that have more of an advantage in a sense of maturation. Because although this is American, this is actually from the north of the States. This is, this doesn't have like that rapid maturation, hot climate thing. Like a 3-year-old Cavalan, for example, which they don't age statement, but I guess I've had a 3-year-old Cavalan. I've had some Cavalans of, I think, are 3. I'd take this. This is wildly good. That's very impressive stuff. So, what distillery is this? Where is this from? What's going on? This is from Seattle. But before you get too carried away, it is not the most commonly thought of distillery in Seattle. It's not a Westland. Although, sorry to cross-promote a little bit, we do have 2 Strath exclusive Westland single casks that are now available for pre-order. So if you were looking for a Westland, we have some. This is a distillery I'd never actually had before. It's a distillery called Copperworks. And again, much like the English whiskey we had earlier, I was teasing our local audience, trying to bait them into guessing it was a different distillery. See if you can guess which one from this trivia. Created in copper stills that were built in Scotland, but now find themselves very far away from home. This far northwest distillery was founded by a pair of brewers in 2013 and is proudly part of the downtown core of its local community. It is not 2 brewers. Sorry, it is not a Yukon single malt. As we know, it is American, it is from Seattle, and it is Copperworks. And there's not really that much information about Copperworks. They seem to put all of their efforts into making good whiskey rather than promoting their whiskey or telling their story. Their website's really clunky. There's not really that much information out there. But if any of the rest of their whiskey is anywhere near as good as this, I need to keep an eye on them. And frankly, Seattle's not that far away. I should probably go give them a visit because this was a wonderful experience. A wonderful experience which is almost definitely sold out by now because it went to a draw on Thursday, and I know for a fact that the person it went to a draw where only one person didn't get it, and they plan on being outside of the store when we open at 10 o'clock in the morning to get their remaining bottle on Monday morning. So I can practically guarantee right now that this is already gone. I'm very sorry. I tried to save one for the online store, but it's just too popular. Worth a check, just in case, strathliquor.com/SMWS. There is a slim chance that there might be one available, but if there is, it is $260.78. And hopefully, we'll get more from Copperworks in the future. Kelly and Rob, if you're watching, I request more Copperworks, please. This was a delight. An unexpected one at that. So different. So herbal, so nutty, so... like an unsweetened liqueur. So much happening. All right. Well, a slightly reduced in length Outturn this month. Only 6 new bottles, partially because of the 7 bottles there wasn't quite enough for everyone to get it, which is why we had the English whiskey and Alberta's got the Glasgow whiskey. Check out if you're interested in something from the Glasgow distillery. That, unlike last month's interesting weird bourbon, is a single malt from Glasgow, so different code, actually, for those who are collecting codes. Check out our Alberta stores, Kensington Wine Market in Calgary and Keg and Cork in Edmonton. And our final whiskey today, well, there's nothing to see here. The panel were dismayed to encounter such a deliberately terrible whiskey. To look upon the colour, you might imagine that this was a stunningly concentrated dram infused with deeply syrupy peat aromas, or that it may contain notes such as ancient balsamico, natural tar liqueurs, herbal wood smoke, and root beer syrup. Alas, it is dreadful, and we must avoid like Vogon poetry. In happier circumstances, water might have brought further notes of umami paste, salted honey, iodine drops, and menthol tobaccos. If you were to stoop to putting this whiskey in your mouth, you would certainly not find the most thrilling fusion of tars, oils, peat extracts, and exotic wood resins. Neither should you then add water. Would you encounter sublime and graceful power, length, depth, complexity, and the beauty of a perfect fusion of sherry and peat. Hopefully this tasting note has assisted you in avoiding this wicked distillate. Please ensure all bottles of this grog are safely disposed of at SMWS Canada's headquarters. Matured for 11 years in a wretched bourbon hogshead, before being transferred to a definitely not sublime refill American oak Pedro Jimenez sherry hogshead. I think they're trying to trick us. As you might have guessed, this is a bloody good whiskey, and for many people who got to try this at the Victoria Whisky Festival, where it was featured in a bit of a preview, you know how good this is. I've had a lot of requests for this whiskey already, and it's not even been released yet. Come on, guys. However, again, sold out on Thursday, probably going to sell out today on Sunday. There's going to be 1, maybe 2 bottles for the online release, so get there fast if you want it. This is cool. This is the second time this month that the SMWS has broken a new rule of theirs that was breaking a previous rule. So, in the past, everything that came in these green bottles emblazoned with this logo and this style of label was a single cask. Bottled from a single cask, whether it had been recast or in the same initial cask the whole time. And then they started doing bottlings for festivals, where they wanted the whole world to have the experience of sharing in the same experience. So they did single malts that were, 3 or 4 casks blended together. Still cask strength, still a single malt, but they broke that rule and created a new rule, which allowed them to do it. And now they're breaking that rule because this was bottled for Gilles at the Isla Whisky Festival, but it is a single cask. Only 271 of these were made. So this is particularly special, and we're very, very lucky to have this, and it is a strict limit of 1 per member. Yeah. All right, I'm going in. So, this distillery is the most prominent in the SMWS. I'm fairly sure no distillery other than this has even breached 400 yet, and this is now 445th from Distillery 53. And I challenged myself to try and give new and interesting different trivia, because I've presented maybe 60 of these in the last 8 years, something like that. I'm not entirely sure exactly how many, but a wildly large amount from this distillery, because it's not everyone's favorite, but it is a large favorite. A lot of people absolutely love it and can't wait for the next one. There's some people I know who have over a dozen whiskies from the SMWS from this distillery in their collection. I might be one of them. So I challenged myself to try and come up with some new trivia, which is kind of fun. So I'll have a sip and then I'll share some of that with you. But the interesting thing for me about this whiskey is it doesn't taste like itself. This doesn't taste like a standard 53. In fact, a lot of people from the trivia guess that this was a 10, and that's kind of what I would go towards based on the tasting notes as well. Yeah, it doesn't have as much of the bacony kind of notes. It's got a little bit more softer smoke and just, beautiful, like, wood smoke herbal notes intertwined with that beautiful sherry. Yeah, it's Pedro Jimenez and peat. Such a nice blend of flavours that just complement each other. They can fight each other, though. It's not always a sure thing. I've had lots of sherry-peated whiskies where the flavours don't dance, they battle, and it's a little uncomfortable in the mouth that you're not quite sure where to pull your attention to. This is one of the ones where they are getting along very nicely. Maybe too nicely. It's a tantalising tango that they are. Intertwined in a tantalising tango. That's a good SMWS name, isn't it? Maybe that's why it's called Nothing to See Here. It's getting a little beyond dancing and we should all avert our gaze. Oh, that's lovely. Very lovely. Okay, so this distillery. Although they have some traditional techniques, such as wooden washbacks and an on-site warehouse, although that was a bit of a trick because they do have an on-site warehouse, but the majority of their whiskey is actually shipped out in tanker and matured on the mainland. They also are very happy to change with the times. They were the first distillery in their region to remove worm tubs, and in favour of shell and tubes. And they were the very first on the island as well to switch from coal to steam-heated stills. From 2013 onwards, they approximately about a third of their distillate is unpeated. And now you can tell why a lot of people were guessing Bunnahabhain, frankly, Distillery 10. This is not, it's Distillery 53. It is, of course, the legendary Caol Ila. A glorious whiskey from a glorious distillery that doesn't, like I said, doesn't taste like most Caol Ilas that I've had. It's a little bit different of a profile than you might expect on paper. If you like Caol Ila but you prefer Bunnahabhain, this might be the Caol Ila for you, I have to say. So, aged for 15 years, it was distilled on the 24th of September 2007. 271 bottles came out of it at cast strength of 56.7. I realise I got a bit carried away and never actually told you the stats, did I? But one important stat for some of you, one or two lucky people who are watching this video who will have a chance to purchase this whiskey from the Strath, strathliquor.com/SMWS, $302.52. That is the price on this pretty little whiskey, and pick it up if you want it. I will see you guys on the next video. Thank you so much for joining us for Outturn 148. I've seen the list for Outturn 149, and I'm very excited. The preview tastings for that will be coming up shortly on the 22nd and 25th of February, and I look forward to joining some of you in the Maple Room for that. And yeah, as many people have pointed out, the April Outturn is Outturn 150, and I've been asked if there's anything special in the lineup for it. I don't know yet, but I really look forward to finding out. I'm sure there's always something special. I'm sure there's something pretty interesting and unique for the 150th tasting. It is a bit of a landmark. Slanchavar, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.
For the Diamond is a ship, me lad, for the David Strait she's bound, and the quay it is all garnished with bonny lasses round. Captain Thompson gives the orders to sail the ocean wide, where the sun it never sets, me lads, though the dark clouds dim the skies. And it's cheer up, me lads, let your hearts never fail, for the bonny ship, the Diamond, she goes fishing for the whale. All along the quay at Peterhead, the lassies stand around, with the shoals all pulled around them, and the salt tears running down. Now don't you weep, me bonny lass, so you'll be left behind, for the rose will bloom on Greenland's ice before we change your mind. And it's cheer up, me lads, let your hearts never fail, for the bonny ship, the Diamond, she goes fishing for the whale. Here's a health to the Resolution, and likewise the Eliza Swan. Here's a health to the Battle of Old Montrose and the Diamond Ship of Fame. We'll wear our trousers of the white and our jackets of the blue. When we return to Peterhead, we'll be sweethearts to you. And it's cheer up, me lads, let your hearts never fail, for the bonny ship, the Diamond, she goes fishing for the whale. Well, it'll be bright both day and night when the Greenland lads come home, we're the ship that's full of oil, me boys, and money to our names. We'll make those cradles for to rock and the blankets for to tear, and every lass in Peterhead will sing hush-o by my dear. And it's cheer up, me lads, let your hearts never fail, for the bonny ship, the Diamond, she goes fishing for the whale. And it's cheer up, me lads, let your hearts never fail, for the bonny ship, the Diamond, she goes fishing for the whale.